Hello. Today's class is going to focus on the Harlem Renaissance. We will soon be reading a play titled Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, which got its inspiration from the topics, ideas, and attitudes brought about by the Harlem Renaissance. Before we began reading this play, we needed to discover what the Harlem Renaissance was all about. This video will give you instructions and guide you through the activities of the lesson. Feel free to pause the video or go back and watch portions again at any time. Our first activity is called a theme survey. Please pull that paper out and have it in front of you right now. Follow along with the directions as I explain to you what to do. Starting at the top. The theme of a literary work is an insight about life or human nature that the writer presents to the reader. During the Harlem Renaissance, authors shared ideas about love, identity, dreams, values, and prejudice. Looking at the chart, there are 8 statements that express themes that you will find in the literature of the Harlem Renaissance. What you are going to do is to read each statement and think about how much you agree with that statement. So, for example, looking at number 1, it says, dreams can either save or destroy a person. So you're going to decide how much do you agree or disagree with that statement. Looking at the before reading category, there's another section titled Level of Agreement. So you're going to decide, do I strongly agree with that statement? If I do, I will put a number 1 under Level of Agreement. Do I agree somewhat with the statement? If I do, then I will put a number 2 under Level of Agreement. Do I disagree somewhat with the statement? If that's the case, I will put a number 3 under Level of Agreement. And if I strongly disagree with the statement, then I'm going to write a number 4 in the box. Then I'm going to explain why I feel the way I do. So I'm going to jot down some comments about the statements in this explanation box. I'm going to write why I agree or disagree with the statement. I'm going to write whether or not certain circumstances affect the way I feel about the statement. If I need more room, I will flip this paper over and write more of my thoughts on the back. Once I have completed my level of agreement and explanation for number 1, I'm going to do the same process for numbers 2 through 8 for each of these statements that are themes of the Harlem Renaissance and of the play The Raisin in the Sun that we will soon be reading. You will also notice that there is an after reading category over here that has the same columns, level of agreement, and explanation, and you will also see that there are some post-reading directions down here at the bottom of the paper. We are not going to fill out these sections right now. After you get this information from today's lesson and you explore some of the works of the Harlem Renaissance, and then we also read A Raisin in the Sun, you will then go back and finish this assignment. And at that time, you will again go through each of these statements and you will record your level of agreement and your explanations for each of the statements. But this time, you will be basing your level of agreement and explanations on the literature that you've read, and you will disclose if you have any new feelings about the themes based on the reading that you have done in this unit. After you have completed the theme survey, you're going to move on to the next activity, which is a KWL with the Harlem Renaissance Brain Pop movie. Most of you are familiar with the KWL chart. So we are going to start out by thinking about any information that we already know about the Harlem Renaissance. Anything that I do know, I'm going to record here in this K category. If I don't know a lot about the Harlem Renaissance, that's okay. This is why we're doing the lesson, is to give you more information and background about this particular time period. Once you've written everything that you know in this section, you're going to move on to the W category. What would you like to know about the Harlem Renaissance? What information do you not know at this particular time that you would need to know in order to understand the literature of the time period? You're going to record any questions that you have or anything you would like to know in this particular section. Before we can move on to the Learned column, we are going to need to watch the Brain Pop movie about the Harlem Renaissance. But first, let's take a look at the categories in the L section. Right here is background. I'm going to record any background information that I learned in the video in this section. Over here is migration. If you are not sure about the definition of migration, it is the process of going from one region or place to another. In this section, we're going to record anything we learned from the video about people going from one particular location to another. In this category, we're going to write anything we learned from the movie about literature, music, or arts. And then this section, other contributions, is just kind of a catch-all category where we're going to record anything else we learned about the Harlem Renaissance that doesn't fit under one of these other three categories. So we will take some time right now to complete the K and the W sections. When you are finished with this, then you will move on to the video. Once you have finished the K and W sections of your KWL chart, you are ready to watch the Harlem Renaissance Brain Pop movie. So you first need to open an internet browser. I have opened Internet Explorer, but you could also choose Mozilla Firefox. And then you need to go up here to the top and type in the web address. It is www.brainpop.com, C-O-M, and then a backslash. Social Studies, SOCIALSTUDIES, backslash. US History, USHISTORY, backslash Harlem Renaissance, HARLEMRENAISSANCE, backslash. Then you can either hit enter or you can press the arrow key and it should take you to this website. Okay, you have over here where you can scroll up and down, you have your bar here on the right hand side, just like usual, and then it says click here to play the movie right in the middle. Now before I do that, I want to make sure that I have my KWL chart in front of me so that I can record anything that I learned from this movie in one of the four categories in the L section. Okay, let me show you a few things about playing the movie. I just click anywhere on it. Okay, now if I would like to watch the movie in this smaller screen, that's completely fine. If I'd like to make it larger, I'm just going to hit this button here with the four arrows and I will go to full screen. Now if I'd like to get out of full screen mode, on my keyboard in the upper left hand corner there's the escape button. I'm just going to press that and then I go back to normal size. Okay, but I want to watch in full screen mode, so I'm going to hit that button again. Now something that might be helpful to you because you're going to be writing down information that you've learned in your KWL chart. There's a closed captioning button. If I hit this, okay, then my controls are going to go down here, but in this black area right here, in this black space, are going to be the words that are being said in the movie. Okay, so that might be helpful to you. Not only are you going to listen to the information, but you'll be able to read it on your screen as well. Okay, now if I would like to play the movie, I'm going to hit the triangle button and it's going to start. And you can see here that words are showing up.
Hey, you're getting better. Dear Tim and Moby.
Now when I would like to pause the movie, I'm going to just click the pause button. You might like to do that at any point during the movie so that you can record information in the L portion of your assignment. Okay. Now let's say that I missed some information. Over here you will see the bar that tells you how much or where you are in the movie. Okay, and there's a dot, and I now know that there are 3 minutes and 11 seconds of the movie, and I'm on second 14. If I click here on this little dot, I can go back and forth and it's going to take me to the different parts of the movie. So if I miss something, if I want to watch a particular section again, I can just scroll here and it will take me to different parts of the movie.
Drew on the rhythm.
Okay, alright, so I want to go back to the beginning here. Okay, and I'm going to push play and I'm going to watch the Brain Pop movie. When I am finished watching it, and I have finished going back and rewatching different sections or the entire thing if I want to, and then I am going to finish writing down all of the information I've learned in each of the 4 categories, I will be done with the KWL assignment. Once you have finished watching the Harlem Renaissance Brain Pop movie and completed your KWL chart, you are ready to move on to the Harlem Renaissance Brain Pop quiz. Now, this is not a quiz to be nervous about. It is just another way to make sure that you have gained a lot of information about the Harlem Renaissance, and you can actually use your KWL chart to help you through this. Your screen should look like this when you finish the movie. Okay, in the little area where the movie was playing, there should be this section here that says take the quiz. If there isn't, there's also in the lower the lower left-hand corner, there's another box that says quiz. So you can actually click on either one of those, but I'm just going to click on this one. And it is going to take me to this site. Now, up here it talks about login information. We don't need to do any of that to take the quiz. So I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit. And once again, I can make this quiz full screen or not, whatever I would like to do. And then it gives you 2 choices. You can take the classic quiz, or you can take the review quiz. Since we've watched this movie, we are going to take the review quiz. So I'm just going to click on that. Okay. Now it's going to give me, there are actually 10 questions, and so this is question 1. What does the word Renaissance mean? So I will read the question, and I will read the choices. A, art, B, rebirth, C, culture, or D, work. Okay, so we'll do this one together, and hopefully you would click choice B, rebirth. So I will click on that, okay, and then they will tell me if I'm correct or not correct. If I'm correct, it will take me on to the next question, as it did here. I'm now on question number 2. If I was incorrect, it's going to allow me to pick a new choice. So I cannot move on in the quiz until I have chosen the correct answer. When I have made it through this quiz, this screen will come up. It'll ask me if I would like to print, email, or view my results, and I am going to choose email. So I'm just going to that little envelope, and I'm going to write my name, and then I'm going to click on the second line here, and I'm going to type my teacher's email address. So I'm going to put jdunn@usd415.org, O-R-G, and then on this next line I'm going to put English 1. Okay, and then here I will click OK. And it will tell me that my quiz results have been sent to my teacher. And I will say OK. And that way your teacher can get your quiz results. You don't even have to report them. It'll just send an email straight to her. Okay, and actually it tells me up here how I ended up scoring. Okay, I can then review my answers, or I can try taking the quiz again, and if you do that, you can resend your new scores to your teacher. After we have gained a lot of information about the Harlem Renaissance itself, we are going to focus on some of the notable authors of the time period. We're going to start with Langston Hughes, who was probably the most well-known writer of the time. So we're going to look at some background information about him. Langston Hughes was actually born in Joplin, Missouri, so not too far from us. And he lived with his grandmother in Lawrence for a while. He started writing at a young age, and he published his work in literary magazines. He left college and took a job on a ship, and so he traveled to Europe and Africa. He became well known for his book, The Weary Blues, which was actually a collection of poems about a Harlem musician. He did graduate from Lincoln University, which was in Pennsylvania, and he lived in New York City. He wrote all kinds of literature, poetry, plays, essays, history, and fiction. And he became part of a literary group that emphasized Negro topics, African heritage, the slave era, and modern city life. He was one of the first American poets to reach a wide audience with his direct and poetic style, and he used rhythms and language of everyday black speech. He used his writing skills to promote and celebrate the black race and to put a spotlight on the Negro condition in America. He was immersed in the language, feelings, and music of Harlem. He used humor, wit, and faith in his writing, and it also reflected spirituals, jazz, and blues music. He was a strong believer in human rights, which was influenced by his own experiences with discrimination and segregation, and he is considered the dominant voice in 20th century American literature and was the most influential black poet. He was also an inspiration and a mentor for other black writers. Moving on, Zora Neale Hurston was another popular writer of the time. She grew up in Eatonville, Florida, which was a small town founded by African Americans. She was raised by various relatives after her mother passed away. She never finished grade school, but she did eventually graduate from college. She moved to New York City, and she became a part of the same literary group of black writers that Langston Hughes was also a part of. She felt that the average white person used stereotypes to keep minorities in their place or to keep them from moving forward and progressing in life and in society. She wanted people to understand that minorities are human beings just like everyone else, and that they do think about other things besides the race problem. She was very interested in the folk spirit of Southern life and very interested in expressing her cultural heritage. So she roamed the back roads of Florida, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and she talked to people and collected stories, songs, tales, proverbs, and crafts. She was exploring the lives of common black people in her writing. She talked about the complexity of their lives, the richness of their culture, and their personal relationships. She celebrated the black culture in her writing and led people to appreciate their courage, humor, art, intellect, life, and their society of the black people living in the South in the early 20th century. She did establish a good reputation for herself after publishing these folklore collections and also travel books and her own autobiography. However, she experienced a decline in her reputation and she died in poverty. Later, her literary reputation spread again after her death. Another very important writer was Countee Cullen. He was adopted by a minister and his wife. He went to school in New York, he graduated from NYU, and he even earned a master's degree at Harvard. He then returned to New York and became a teacher. He started writing poetry in high school, and he published his first book of poetry, which was titled Color, at the age of 22. He wrote in all kinds of genres, but he was most well known as a poet. In his poetry, he expressed his contempt for American racial prejudice. He used intense emotion as the tone of his writing. He wrote using conventional literary forms like rhyme, but he was still thought to be a social protest writer. He expressed concern and frustration of the African American experience. He often used religious viewpoints, and those were the themes of his work. And he also was an editor of a black magazine, so he was very influential in the other young writers, especially black writers, who were published. Now that we have information about the Harlem Renaissance and the writers of the time, we are going to move on to a poem by Langston Hughes, who, if you will remember, was an important author of the time period. This poem is titled Harlem. Please follow along while I read it aloud. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Now we are going to complete an analysis of the poem. You will notice that I have numbered the title and then the lines of the poem in orange numbers with boxes around them. We are going to take a look at the poem line by line, which will help us figure out what the meaning of the poem is. I've created some charts to help us with this process. So I'm going to take a look at the first chart, which has number 1, Harlem, which is the title. So I'm going to think to myself, well, what is Harlem? Why would that be the title? That's what I want to figure out. So below, I have listed the thoughts that are going through my head. Well, I know that Harlem is in New York. I know it's where the Renaissance occurred. So that's what I write in the first box. In the second box, I put, well, it's a location where a community of black people lived. Those are a few facts that I know about Harlem. So that's what I'm going to list. Moving on to the second chart, number 2, is the line, what happens to a dream deferred? Now the first thing I need to do is figure out what does deferred mean, because I'm not sure. So I look that up in the dictionary and I find out that deferred means to put something off or to delay. I think about this line a little bit more and I write, we think about what might happen if we wait to try to make a dream come true. So that is what comes to my mind when I consider that second line, what happens to a dream deferred? What happens, what might happen if we wait on our dreams to come true? Moving on to the third line, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So I have to think about that a little bit. I need to think about raisins. I need to think about what it means if something dries up. So I wrote in the first box, when things dry up, they lose their moisture or water. They go away or they die. I also write about raisins. Raisins are actually grapes that have dried up. We know that grapes start out being juicy and they taste really good, but once they dry out, they get all shriveled up and they get harder. Moving on to number 4, or fester like a sore and then run. Once again, I need to think about what fester means. So I can look fester up in the dictionary, and I know that that's when something doesn't heal very well or it's not being very well cared for. So I write in this first box here, a sore that festers is gross. It doesn't heal or isn't being well cared for, and it forms pus. And in case you don't know what pus is, it's that yellow, kind of thick, gross, gooey stuff that you get in scrapes or cuts or wounds. And I think about a little bit more of that line and the running part of it. So I wrote down here in the second box, if you are running from something, you are trying to escape it. If we are still thinking about the sore, the festering sore, maybe the pus and the blood are running out of it. And if you're like me, that puts a really disgusting image in my mind. The next line, number 5, does it stink like rotten meat? So I wrote down what I know about rotten meat. When meat sits too long, either in or out of the refrigerator, it starts to smell really bad. It's going to start smelling bad sooner if it's out of the refrigerator, but it can still happen inside the refrigerator. Trust me, it's happened to me. And then I think about when the meat is rotten, we just get rid of it, we throw it away. We can't eat it anymore because it's too gross, it's not fit to eat. And then I think about number 6, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet. So when things like honey and candy, like really sugary things like that, when they form a crust if they sit out too long, if they aren't covered and stored properly. So like if we don't put them in a Tupperware container or a plastic bag, they get hard if they just sit out. And they form what people would call a crust. And syrup, in the second part here, syrup is really sticky and it gets hard if it's left out too. So if you think about it, like if a drop of syrup gets on your countertop when you're eating your pancakes, what happens if you let it sit there all day and you don't clean it up? It's this really hard little sticky spot. All right, number 7, maybe it just sags like a heavy load. So I thought about what sagging means. When things get old and have too much weight on them, they sag, like bookshelves with too many books or floorboards that have had lots of people walking all over them. And the second part here, sometimes something that is heavy weighs a lot. It is hard to carry something that's heavy by yourself. And when things are heavy or they're weighing on our minds, it causes us to stress out and to worry. And then number 8, or does it explode? Now I know that this line is italicized, so that's telling me that the line must be important. And then I think about things that explode. Bombs and fireworks explode. Someone who is really upset explodes. When things build up over time and can't be held back, they explode. Now that I've gone through each line of the poem individually, and I've thought to myself, what does each word mean? What images come to mind as I'm reading? I'm now ready to figure out what this whole poem means. So I'm going to look at the poem again. I'm going to think about what I know now about the Harlem Renaissance. I'm also going to think about what I know about Langston Hughes as a writer. I'm going to think about the ideas and the attitudes of the time period. And I'm going to put all of that together and try to figure out what he's saying. So I went back over my notes from the poem, each individual line, and this is what I came up with. What does the poem mean? Harlem focuses on the dreams of the black population. If black people put off their dreams, do they eventually just die and go away? But what if the dreams don't go away? Do they stay with them and nag them and they can't escape them? Do the dreams hang around until they have to do something about them, so they throw them away? If they don't take care of their dreams, do they become hard people? Do their lives get sticky and messy? Are they stuck in one place? Do the dreams get to be too much for them, too heavy and stressful to deal with? Do the dreams shatter, never to be seen again? Does society ever let black people realize their dreams? And this is what I decided that the poem is about. It's about the dreams of black people not ever being realized because society won't let their dreams be realized. Now, if I go back to some of my previous slides, okay, and I start from the beginning here, okay? Is the poem about a raisin? Is it about a sore? No. Is the poem about rotten meat? Is it about sugar and syrup? No. Is it about a heavy load? Is it about an explosion? No. So I have to decipher all of these words. I have to write down the imagery and the ideas that come to mind, and then I have to apply those words and that language and those lines to the time period so that I can actually figure out that this poem is just comparing dreams to all of those things. An interesting side note is that Lorraine Hansberry, the author of A Raisin in the Sun, actually was inspired to write her play based off of this poem that Langston Hughes wrote. You will notice that her title was A Raisin in the Sun, and that title was taken straight from his poem, Harlem. Now that I have taken you through a poem analysis, it is your turn to try a poem analysis on your own. Please take out the paper that appears on your screen. This is the poem Tableau by Countee Cullen, who you will remember was another important writer from the Harlem Renaissance. Let's read through the poem together. Locked arm in arm they crossed the way, the black boy and the white, the golden splendor of the day, the sable pride of night. From lowered blinds the dark folk stare, and hear the fair folk talk, indignant that these two should dare in unison to walk. Oblivious to look and word, they pass and see no wonder that lightning brilliant as a sword should blaze the path of thunder. Now I want you to try to understand this poem, to decipher the the words and the meanings, just the way we did with Langston Hughes' poem. Okay, so you're going to start with number 1, the title, Tableau. Now, if you aren't sure what tableau means, you will probably need to look it up in the dictionary. Once you get a definition, once you get some thoughts about that title, you will record them here next to number 1. You'll then move on to the second line, locked arm in arm, they cross the way. Okay, so you'll come down here to number 2, and on that line, you will write down any thoughts that come to mind. What does it mean to be locked arm in arm? What might cross the way mean? Okay, so you're going to write down anything that you can think of that would have to do with that line. You will continue to do that for lines 3 through 13. You'll record that information that you think of here on these lines. If you run out of room, feel free to use the back of the paper. Once you have written down everything you've thought of for lines 1 through 13, you're going to answer this question: what does the poem mean? So you're going to take the information that you've written down, you're going to think about what you know about the author Countee Cullen, you're going to think about what you know about the Harlem Renaissance and the ideas and the attitudes that were occurring during that time, and you're going to write down in sentences what you think the poem means. Now, this is not an easy task. Deciphering poems is often challenging. Just do the best that you can. Sometimes people have different ways of looking at poems. Sometimes different people see poems or get different meanings out of poems. If you don't have the exact same response as the person sitting next to you, that is perfectly fine. Do your best and carefully consider what you think Countee Cullen is trying to tell his black and white audience in this poem. Your final task of the day is to complete this exit slip on our lesson about the Harlem Renaissance. So the first thing you'll do is self-assess the understanding of the material that we have focused on today. Is it clear as glass? Do you understand everything perfectly that we've done today? Are there bugs on the windshield? Do you understand most of it, but some things are still kind of iffy? Or is your windshield completely covered in mud? Did nothing make sense to you today? Is everything pretty hard still for you to understand? Okay, once you've circled one of those options, you're going to come down here. Name at least 2 things you found interesting about the Harlem Renaissance, the writers, the themes, the poems, etc. Please do not list facts. Okay, don't tell me when the Harlem Renaissance was. Don't tell me who the authors were. I want you to give your opinion about the material that you've learned today. What was actually interesting to you? And then last, what can I do to help you better understand this material? This is your opportunity to let me know if there's anything in this instructional video that needs to be better explained to you before we move on with our unit. All right, before you leave class today, you will need to turn in your theme survey, your KWL chart, your poem analysis of Tableau by Countee Cullen, and also this exit slip. Also, be sure to close your Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox web browser and log off of your computer. Thank you for your patience and for being so focused during this instructional video today about the Harlem Renaissance.